4, 3, 2, 1.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
A confirmed attack is taking place against the United States. Aliens from an unknown location have been reported in multiple states.
We are controlling transmission.
There is another world that awaits, far beyond what we can see and feel. A place that's anything but ordinary.
What you believe might not be. Step into the zone of the vast unknown. UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, conspiracies and cover-ups. Into the Parabnormal we go with Jeremy Scott.
From the cold, dark depths of a secret dungeon somewhere deep in the remote Pacific Northwest, I am Jeremy Scott. And, of course, this is the program that's always been somewhere between the paranormal and the abnormal. This show has taken on its identity because of those who have been on the program. I can dig up articles. I can talk, maybe not for days, but certainly for hours, about the subjects that fascinate me. But it's really those who have been out there doing the research, who have been meeting with experiencers, who are the real gems here. I mean, we would have nothing to report. There would be nothing credible to share. There would just be these sightings, and that would be it. And, of course, there's much more to this phenomenon than that. There have been many who, over the years, have dedicated their lives to investigating the phenomenon of unidentified flying objects, or what's now known as unidentified anomalous phenomenon. In the case of Earl Grey Anderson, more than many investigators who are still working today, talking about the number of cases that Earl has investigated there in Southern California. And you also make connections as you do this program, because I'll get an email out of left field saying, "Hey, Jeremy, I'm so-and-so. I would like to come on your program." And I look them up, and, maybe they sound interesting, and we bring them on the program, and that is that. Sometimes it's a publisher who says, "I know somebody, they're my client who you should bring on," or it's just a genuine listener, or it's another guest making a suggestion for somebody else that they know who would make a good guest on this program. And a gentleman who we'll hear from a little bit later on in the program by the name of Jeremy Norrie had been on the program on a few occasions. He has made several documentaries about subjects we would deem strange or abnormal or paranormal. And so it's right down our alley to have him on the program. And, of course, I always want to go a step or two further. I don't know if you've been able to gather that. Sometimes maybe a little bit over the top, but I digress. Rather than talking to Jeremy, I said, "Hey, is there anybody else that, from your film, maybe somebody who is one of the prominent speakers? Would they come on and join you and, basically back you up? Because it makes for a much better conversation when we can have a three-way. When you get much more than that, when you get if it was 3 or 4 guests, that can be challenging. I think I have managed 5 or 6 at a time. They were a member of a paranormal investigative team, and they were all in one area, and I would just throw questions at them, and whoever wanted to answer would just kind of jump in. So it was fairly easy, but if you have people in different locations, they don't really know when to chime in unless you direct questions to certain individuals. It can be hard, and people are jumping on top of each other, or there's, spaces where people are pausing, waiting for somebody else to jump in. And, of course, the internet has a lot to do with that. There's a delay in transmission as well. So there's just a lot of factors there. And you don't really think about it until you've done it, and you realize it can sometimes be a mess. And so really here, what has taken place is I have met through Jeremy Norrie, Earl Grey Anderson, who appeared on this program just a couple of weeks, it was, before we went to McMiniman's UFO Festival in 2023. And because I also knew that he was going to be there, I was really looking forward to having him on the program. And so got a chance to have Earl on, and then a couple of weeks later met him in person, and we spoke one additional time. In fact, just a couple of months ago it was, after Jacob Barber came forward and the video of the egg-shaped UFO was released. Wanted to get his comments on that. And also he was appearing in Jeremy's latest film on UFO crash retrieval, which was, of course, very timely. And so I want to bring you something here. This was the final time that Earl came on the program, and here's how he greeted me.
Hi there, Jeremy. It's good to see you.
And I never thought, as you never do, that this is going to be the last time that you talk to someone, but it certainly was. I know days before he came on the program for the final time, he was talking with Ron James in his brand new studio, and they had posted some pictures of that, and it really looked like, much like what Earl did, he enjoyed the heck out of it. Just always seemed that, not knowing him beyond our few interactions, and I can't speak for people personally because I don't accompany these people to their homes. I don't live with them. I don't know what they're like, but from on the surface, just one of the nicest, most positive people who I have come to know, whether we're talking about UFOs or not. And speaking of UFOs, I want you to listen to what Earl told me on one of his appearances about the subject of UFOs.
I feel like there's probably three kinds of UFOs. I think there are the black budget UFOs that are ours. And some of that, I think, is almost certainly from, I would hope that we had, in 75 years since Roswell, that we would have been able to figure something. But I think there's their UFOs, which are probably interdimensional or from other planets, other planetary systems. And then I think that some UFOs are very likely and probably us from the future. They're historians, and they're coming back here to document certain periods that were interesting, that were in our history. But I see the UFO cases that I have. I see certain patterns that are repeating, and I don't release everything to the public. I keep certain things for myself, so I can sort of, compare cases and stuff that people don't know about UFOs. And even doing that, I see repeat over and over and over certain attributes that are things that we can't do. So, and if we do figure out how to go back in time at some point, certainly we would be sending historians to, John Lennon saw a UFO. My old friend, sadly, rest in peace, Chris, the bass player from the band Yes, he had a close encounter with a craft that looked exactly like the one that John Lennon saw. I think that perhaps maybe it's a musicologist from, the year 3000 or something, coming back to document certain people that were of interest. So that's kind of my view. It's not everybody's view, but that's what I think is happening.
Earl Grey Anderson, rest in peace. More to come. His friends, those who knew and loved him, join us tonight to pay tribute to Earl Grey Anderson.
Into the paranormal.
Somewhere between the paranormal and the abnormal, I am Jeremy Scott as we pay tribute to our dear friend Earl Grey Anderson, who was not only, as mentioned, the Southern California chapter director for MUFON, state director, star team member, executive committee member of the Experiencer resource team. Also, though, with the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance on its board of directors. And joining us right now from the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance is its chairman, Dan Harari. Good evening, Dan.
Hey, how are you? It's a sad time. It's a sad time.
It certainly is. As I was mentioned, giving my brief story about my interaction, and it was brief. I certainly interacted with him in person, but virtually as well. I know others had much more interactions, including at Hollywood Disclosure Alliance meetings, Southern California MUFON meetings. You were one of those individuals. How long had you known Earl?
Well, that's a great little story. Earl and I became instant friends. Sometimes in life you meet someone and they're just an instant friend. I met Earl exactly 2 years ago at Alien Con, Pasadena, in April 2023. I was there. I had a booth there for my book, my sci-fi book called After They Came. I was promoting the book. And at the end of my aisle where my booth was, I saw the MUFON booth. And at the MUFON booth was Earl Grey Anderson and Ron James. I had never met either of those gentlemen. So I just took 2 copies of my book, walked down the aisle, and I went up to Earl and Ron. I said, "Hi, my name is Dan Harari. I wrote this book. It's based on some personal UFO experiences I've had in my life. I'd like to gift this to you." And I handed Ron and Earl the books. And Earl looked at me and said, "Thank you, man. That's so nice." And then we started to talk. And, maybe 10 minutes, really, maybe 10 minutes. And before I left, Jeremy, I said to Earl, "Earl, you don't know this yet, but you and I are going to become very good friends." Now, I didn't remember I said that to him. He told me that a year later. "Earl, you and I are going to become very good friends." A month after that, Steve Bassett and I created the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. And then that summer, 2023, Steve Bassett and I put together the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. Well, Earl and Ron James were among the very first people to not only join our group, but to be on the board of directors. So I only knew Earl for 2 years. Now, in the 2 years, again, sometimes you meet someone and you become a brother. I called Earl, "Hey, Earl, my brother," and Earl called me my brother Dan. "Hey, brother Dan." We became instant friends. He came to every Hollywood Disclosure Alliance event, every single one in the past 2 years, except, of course, Sunday, this past Sunday, 2 days ago, we had our most recent event, and it was just a few hours, Jeremy, after Earl passed. So You can imagine our event. It was called the Ladies of the HDA. We had 5 brilliant female members of HDA talking about their personal abduction experiences, UFO sightings, psionics, oral sound healing. We had Yvonne Smith, the hypnotherapist, talk about abduction therapy. But at the start of this, I had just gotten word that Earl died. So I went up on the mic and I said, "I have very sad news. Earl died." And people gasped. And I almost started to cry. Paul Hynek was in the audience. Paul was very close friends with Earl. Paul went up to the microphone, Jeremy, and he did a lovely eulogy, and he called Earl Grey Anderson a truth warrior, warrior. And I thought, wow, if there was ever a moniker for Earl Grey Anderson, it would be a truth warrior. So he came to all of our HDA events, and I went to many of his Southern California MUFON events. In fact, the very, very first time I ever talked about my UFO experiences and my father's work for the Army, reverse engineering UFOs, and my book After They Came, the first time I ever spoke in public about those topics was at Earl's SoCal MUFON meeting, June 2023. Earl gave me that opportunity. So talk about an instant friendship and a brotherhood and kindred spirits. And I love the guy, and I miss him already.
Right. Absolutely, and I appreciate you sharing how it came to be, even in just such a short time, as you mentioned. He certainly had an impact on many lives, yours included.
Absolutely. In fact, if I can just do a little plug, I launched something, Jeremy, that your listeners might want to know about. Last month, I launched a news service. It's a brand new news service for ufologists, and it's called thewowsignal.news. Thewowsignal.news. It's a news service for all of ufologists. I have major partners, including MUFON, and we put up articles and press releases and guest columns, and it's been really wonderful. It's only 2 months old. The reason I say that is we come out every Monday, which was yesterday, and yesterday we put an in memoriam Earl Grey Anderson at the top of our Wow Signal newsletter. And can I just read the little quote that I put? I wrote his obituary there. Can I just read the quote?
Please do. And by the way, we do have the exact piece that he is speaking about linked up on the episode page. But please, for those who are listening, we want them to hear what it says. Go ahead.
That's very sweet. Thank you. And really, you know, Jeremy, if you or any of your colleagues or your listeners have news, please go to Wow Signal News and let us know, because I'm the editor publisher. I'm looking for news. In his obit at the end, I said the following. I said, "We lost a giant with Earl's passing. He had the biggest heart in the world and was loyal and loving to his core. Our Southern California UFO community mourns his loss deeply. He was a leader and a colleague, a renowned researcher and an important voice on this topic. But most importantly, to countless dozens of us in LA and across the USA, he was a true friend." So I sent this to Earl's wife and children, and they gave me a little heart as well. So I'm very grateful and touched that Lisa, his wife, and his children heard and read the obit. And last night, I don't know if you know this, Jeremy, but last night George Norrie gave Earl a shout out and said, "Rest in peace, Earl Grey Anderson."
Yeah. Well, as anyone should, we're all in this together. Sometimes it does certainly seem like certain elements are at odds with others within the community, and that's unfortunate. But we do have to remember that we're all certainly on the same team, which is we all have an interest in this kind of wacky stuff. And we wish our government would get their act together and tell us what they know. And it's all about getting that evidence, and that was Earl. He was there actually doing the work.
Stephen Bassett is A, one of my best friends, B, the co-creator with me of Hollywood Disclosure Line, C, he was at our event Sunday, Jeremy. So Stephen said a few words about Earl. And what he said was, Jeremy's very touching. He said, in the past 80 years, so many countless pioneers, scientists, researchers, right, authors, filmmakers, people who have been seeking the truth, so many, dozens and dozens for the last 80 years have passed away in search of the truth and in search of, and to try to move the disclosure movement forward. And then Steve Bassett showed on his laptop his in memoriam page on his website, and he put Earl Grey Anderson at the top. And he said, Earl Grey Anderson exemplified the last 80 years of the pioneers and the heroes, and we're losing too many, and disclosure needs to come before we lose any more. Right. Something like that is very powerful. Dan Harari, thank you so much. Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks a lot. Absolutely. Hollywood Disclosure Alliance.org. HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org is the website. And as he mentioned, Wow Signal, thewowsignal.news, thewowsignal.news. All right, more to come. Our tribute to Earl Grey Anderson tonight, Into the Paranormal.
This is Paranormal News. A celestial event that had not been seen in nearly 3 decades was recorded by 18 different observatories. The rare phenomenon known as a stellar occultation occurred as Uranus passed directly between Earth and a distant star on April 7th. The sight lasted about an hour and was visible only from western North America. NASA seized the opportunity to study it, collaborating with an international team of over 30 astronomers. By analyzing how the distant star's light dimmed as it passed behind Uranus, researchers could infer details about the planet's stratosphere, including temperature and composition. These observations provide valuable insights into how the atmosphere has changed since the last significant occultation in 1996. Uranus will pass in front of several dimmer stars over the next 6 years, with the next significant occultation of a star even brighter than the one blocked out this month, set in 2031. I'm George Henry, Paranormal News.
This is what I tell field investigators to do. I said, I want you to walk a tightrope. In one hand, I want you to have the most open-minded, true believer person in your right hand, and in your left hand, I want you to be the worst skeptic that ever lived, and I want you to walk that line and holding on to both of those things and using critical thinking and remembering your past cases and comparing cases to other people's testimonies. Maybe we can get down to what the truth is.
And Earl, you think that it's vital that we hear people out when it comes to telling their experiences, right?
Oh, yeah. I have the biggest maybe box in the world. Most everything that I encounter in this field, it goes in my maybe box. I'm not a guy who stands up in front of a crowd and says, it's this way, my way or the highway, and this is the way it is. Because I don't know. Mostly I have testimony, better cases. Sometimes we get video and photograph evidence, but those are the rare ones. And they're usually fuzzy videos. There's something about the propulsion system of these craft. Even if you're close up to one, it's still a little fuzzy. Either skirting this universe and sort of, halfway between this and another dimension, and that's how they trick Einstein's laws. But I don't know. So I have a huge maybe box, and a lot of these cases go in there, but you can't help but take notice when you hear the same story from multiple people that are good witnesses. I mean, the people I've been mentioning to you have all been military. We put our lives in these guys' hands, our country in their hands. And what's in it for them but ridicule? Why would you go in front of the public, tell a crazy story like that, when you know that you're going to be ridiculed, that people are going to roll their eyes, and even myself as a ufologist, I'm going to take that story apart and look for stuff that doesn't gel, but that for some reason these guys are coming forward, and there seems to be a common thread in the best cases here, and so I don't throw any of them out. They go in the big maybe box, and we'll see. Yeah.
That's Earl Grey Anderson. We remember his appearances on this program, which of course weren't nearly as many as we would have liked. What we've heard so far, though, is that the interactions that people have had with Earl have certainly been memorable. It certainly was for me. It was that way for Dan Harari. And we welcome from the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance founding member Camille James Harmon to the program, who has a story as well about how she first met Earl. Welcome.
Thank you, Jeremy. Yes, I met Earl at the perfect time because I was coming out of a long period of having dropped out of ufology. And then in 2022, I decided to go to the UFO Congress in the Phoenix area, which is an event I had been to before in 2012. So it's been a while. And I had so much fun there, and I reconnected with all my old friends. And we saw a premiere of James Fox's Moment of Contact, the Roswell of Brazil, that documentary at UFO Congress. And then he was showing it again in LA, like the next day. And so when I left the conference in Arizona and drove back to LA, I drove straight to the premiere of Moment of Contact, downtown LA. It was this huge, red carpet event. And, I saw the film again, which was incredible. And there were a lot of UFO people there. They wanted to see this film. So that's when I met Earl. I met him in a very happenstance way. And there was an after party, and we met in the lobby and found out he was, running MUFON in LA. And I said, I used to write for UFO Magazine, and I covered all the MUFON meetings back in the 90s and early 2000s. I was going to the MUFON meetings. But then I had been away and MUFON had stopped. Anyway, long story short, he offered to drive me to the after party because I was nervous being alone in my car downtown. I didn't want to walk downtown alone. So I went with him and his friends in his little car, and we had a great time. And then I started going to the MUFON meetings, and I was really happy because they were in West Hills where I live. And so I was like, oh my God, they're right in my neighborhood. This is amazing. And we really hit it off. Earl was such a people person. He was so loving, no matter what you disagreed on in the world. He was kind. He was generous. He was a great listener. He was a great leader. And he was so wonderful at running the MUFON meetings, introducing people. He also worked on many cases. He was an experiencer himself. He did presentations. His story was amazing. His story about growing up with his mother who worked for Howard Hughes and went in an underground base. Oh my God. And then, his abduction stories of doing CE5 and then having very frightening experiences. So he really helped me come back into this subject matter because I was feeling so cautious. I had gone religious and I had dropped out. I thought it was all demons for a long time. And then I said, you know what? I think that's throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I think it's more complicated than that. I'm going back in. And he got me. He got me that I love Jesus, that I didn't want to make Jesus angry by going back into UFOs. And he was very kind and patient with me when I was returning to ufology, and very encouraging.
And he was like that with everyone. Just very, very gentle in his interactions.
Yes, very diplomatic, very kind, very calming. If people started to get upset about anything, he was able to, bring this chill energy. He was great. I really want his chart. I want Jeff to look at his chart, to be honest, because
your husband, Jeff Harmon.
Yeah, he must have had a very interesting chart. Mm-hmm. And I'll have to see if I can acquire that at some point, just for resolution. Jeff and I have been talking about Earl, and he didn't know Earl like, I did, because I go to everything. But, Jeff's kind of a hermit mystic, and I'm the social butterfly in the family. But I've been so sad. I've been having these waves of grief, just missing Earl. I've had so many friends die and relatives in the past couple of years. It's been a bit much. And I was just devastated when I heard he was sick. I didn't know if he'd pull out of it. And oh Lord, I was listening today to the music from Interstellar, the Cornfield Chase by Anna Lapwood, who's this kind of viral pipe organist who has a wonderful Instagram, and she plays all these incredible concerts on the pipe organ.
Was it soothing?
Well, it was inspiring. It's very sci-fi sounding, but it's on a pipe organ. And so I was just imagining Earl going up into the next dimension with this music from Interstellar playing. And it just made me feel so much better. Like, when people pass, I always have that feeling like, I hope you've got all the answers. Like, I'm so sad that you're gone, but I'm so happy that you're into the next level where you can meet Jesus.
And I hope that's the case for Earl. More to come.
Into the paranormal.
I am Jeremy Scott, somewhere between the paranormal and the abnormal, as we remember the life of Earl Grey Anderson, cherished friend of many, a powerful voice, certainly in ufology. Joining us to continue our conversation, well, before we get there, it's not very often that we have another Jeremy join me on the program. I mean, one's enough. Trust me, I know it can be a lot to handle. But then you bring on a second Jeremy, and, all you know what breaks loose. And Earl really enjoyed the conversation that he had with us on a couple of occasions. As I mentioned earlier, Jeremy is actually who introduced me to Earl, and I don't even know if he knows that story. But when I asked Jeremy to come on to talk about one of his documentaries, I, of course, wanted to spice it up a little bit and asked if he could bring on someone, and he brought on Earl Grey Anderson, and there was just this immediate connection. And then, of course, you'll hear our interaction later on that we had at McMiniman's UFO Fest there 2 years ago in May of 2023, where he referenced the conversation that we had. It certainly had... Seems like it was a memorable one for him, but here's what he had to say.
We had two Jeremys on.
Absolutely, that's kind of rare.
Very confusing, yeah.
And an Earl Grey.
Jeremy 1, Jeremy 2.
Yeah. So here's Jeremy 2. Jeremy Norrie, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Or maybe I'm Jeremy 2 and you can be Jeremy 1. I mean, it makes no difference to me.
Me either. I'm here to talk about Earl. So it was a really fortunate thing that we were able to do the podcast together. And he's such a great conversationalist. So I thought it went really well. And I wish, coming here for better reasons, but we're here to remember Earl. So,
right. You may have done one of the last interview. I certainly had talked to him in late January. I know Ron James had talked to him just a couple of days before I did. You talked to him, less than 2 months ago?
Yeah, I talked to him on March 2nd. And we did our last interview for the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance project. And honestly, I had to force him to do the interview because he wasn't feeling great already. He had kind of noticed this pain in his hip that was causing him a lot of discomfort. And when I went to do the interview, that's when he disclosed to me that he had just recently found out that he had cancer. So that's how quick it went. Like March 2nd, basically, he had just found out. And then here we are.
Wow. Life is, definitely short.
And I was really positive with him at that time. My aunt was going through chemotherapy and she had kind of a really negative diagnosis, and then she had started her chemotherapy, and then she went back to work, and we were all shocked. And so I wanted to give him some encouragement. So I kind of told him that story. And when we did our interview, he was kind of miraculously healed for that period of time while he was talking about his passion, UFOs. And his wife was there, and we both commented on it, and we were hopeful. But cancer is a tough, tough battle, and most people don't win it.
What did Earl tell you that day?
So we had actually talked about the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance project, and I wanted to ask him about the drones. And so we were just kind of talking about the local, similar to what we talked about on the podcast, honestly, like kind of what the theories are, kind of what had progressed as to like the direction of where this was going, what might be possible. And then, we're going to dedicate the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance film to Earl. And I mentioned it to my co-producer, Jason. And then he called me right before the last Hollywood Disclosure Alliance meeting. And he told me there was a thing that I did, kind of not knowing, but it fits really perfectly to end the documentary with Earl. And so I think that's what we're going to do.
And this is going to be released when? And what's it called?
I just think about it as the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance project. But we're going to premiere it at Contact in the Desert. And so that's coming up in June. If anybody wants to see the world premiere, here it is. It's called Inside Hollywood, Aliens, UFOs, and the Quest for Disclosure.
And again, Earl is in that film. And
yes,
what is the general premise of the film? Is it strictly based on how Hollywood views the situation, perhaps, particularly like with its TV shows and films and whatnot?
It is about that. It is also about kind of what the ufologist perspective on the way Hollywood has treated the UFO subject. So, you know, some people might like some of the projects maybe not so much. And there might be a feeling that there's kind of a direction that Hollywood might be trying to steer these films. I don't want to spoil it too much or, you know, take the words out of anyone's mouth. So let them say it for themselves in the movie. But it's about that. It's also about the organization and kind of the goals of the organization and why someone would want to be involved with it, from either the celebrity or Hollywood producer, actor, enthusiast side versus the ufologist and researcher side. So, and bringing all those people together is kind of the goal for the organization, and that's kind of the concept of the movie.
How many films did you actually make with Earl?
So Earl, actually, I was able to add as a producer on a couple of films in the past year. He had never produced a project, and I kind of was trying to show him how he could do more in this world and maybe become one of these well-known ufologist people because he's so lovable. But we made the Michael Schratt project. That was the UFO crash retrieval project. And then we made the project with the experiencers where I interviewed Camille, and he introduced me to her. He introduced me to Dan. You know, Earl was so gracious. The first time I interviewed Earl, I went over there. It was for one of my, it was for the sequel to I Want to Believe. So I was like, I Want to Believe 3 or one of those ones, I think. And I went over there and we ended up talking for so long. I made the MUFON and UFOs movie too out of that. We've made maybe 5 or 7 projects, I think, together at this point. But that was the first one, and I screwed up the video, and I had to call Earl back and say, hey, Earl, would you do it again? And he was super nice and did it again, and then I screwed up the audio. And so I had to call him again and go back a third time. Never had to do that with anyone else.
Wow.
But he is the person I would choose. He was so nice. I would hate to have to ask some people, but I knew that Earl would be gracious enough to do it again.
Show up with his own camera and sound guy?
He should have, you know. We did it in the music studio. Earl loved music. I'm not sure if you knew that. Yes. And he sang a lot, and he did all this music stuff. And so we shot it all 3 times in this music studio that was his friend's. And, you know, he was just so nice to be able to accommodate me. Really appreciate him.
You just enjoyed the experience so much. You wanted to keep reliving it.
Yeah. His stories are good. You know, there's not a lot of stories I could hear over and over and enjoy. But honestly, it wasn't a pain to have to sit with Earl and talk for, God, it must have been something like 6 hours.
Yeah. Wow. All right, Inside Hollywood, Aliens, UFOs, and the Quest for Disclosure is coming to Contact in the Desert, and you can get more information on their website. Jeremy, thank you for joining the program.
My pleasure.
All right, we'll have more to come of our tribute to Earl Grey Anderson. We continue in the next hour.
Stream us on your favorite apps from anywhere in the world, anytime, day or night. Into the Parabnormal with Jeremy Scott.
There's a parallel universe. There
It's part paranormal and part abnormal. There's nothing ordinary about what's on your speakers. Into the Parabnormal with Jeremy Scott.
As I think back on the conversations that we had with the late, great Earl Grey Anderson, he was just so eloquent in how he spoke. Sometimes individuals, they can communicate a point, but the way in which they do so, they take a incredibly long amount of time to get there, and it's not so eloquent, and you're not hanging on their every word. But it's almost when Earl had something to say, you just wanted to sit there and look him in the eye and listen to what he had to say. He would treat experiencers the same way. He had an incredible amount of respect for them. He would often say, if we wish to understand this phenomenon, we need to listen to those who have had face-to-face encounters. So as we listen to some of the words that Earl Grey Anderson has spoken on this program, such a warm interaction as he came to sit down with me at McMiniman's UFO Fest in McMinnville just 2 years ago. Welcome, Earl Grey Anderson, to McMiniman's UFO Fest.
How are you doing there? It's good to see you again.
Good to see you here as well.
We just talked a couple weeks ago.
It is.
We had two Jeremys on.
Absolutely, that's kind of rare.
Very confusing, yeah.
And an Earl Grey.
Jeremy 1, Jeremy 2.
Yeah. we talked about that program. I named it Overwhelming Evidence because I think the evidence is overwhelming. You can choose to believe what you want to believe, but you can't say there's no evidence out there.
No, there's plenty of evidence.
And because you've closed how many cases through MUFON?
Over 900 at this point. If you tally in the ERT cases, Experiencer Resource Team cases, it's well over 1,000 cases that I've personally investigated and closed for MUFON, and the evidence is overwhelming.
Are any of those experiencers going to be part of upcoming congressional briefings or hearings?
From what I am hearing, they're just kind of ignoring the whole experiencer phenomena, which is, kind of my recent tagline has been, what do you think they're here for? To do air shows? They're not here to show off, cool technology like you'd go and show off your hot rod or something. There's something deeper going on, and there's concern for humanity, I believe. I think that there's a lot of, I notice a correlation between people with a military background. This seems to run in families. And an overwhelming amount of the people that I speak with that have had extraordinary encounters, face-to-face encounters with beings, over and over again, I'll hear, my father, by the way, was in the U.S. Air Force and did some work with Project Blue Book. There's one case I'm working on right now that the father was involved with Project Blue Book. And this was his children and his wife, but they wound up having 4 hours of missing time, the entire family. The house flooded with light, anomalous light. It began with them seeing like a blue fireball that crashed into a horse pasture that was in front of their house. It was like church property across the street. And, the father was just kind of thinking, well, it was a meteor, strike, scientifically minded guy. But then they started hearing this weird caterwauling sound that was coming from the lot behind their house. They called the police out. The police came out with their spotlights, didn't see anything. Police left, and again, they're hearing this weird screaming sound, like somebody like a child was in pain or being tortured. So finally, the middle son and the father, they went outside. The house was built sort of under an embankment, so they went up the driveway to where they could see the whole area behind the house, a 2-story house. And they go outside, and there's 2 of these blue fireballs, like the size of a beach ball, that were hanging over their house. And then they watched as these things just took off and again slammed into the embankment behind their house this time. The father at this point knew what was going on because of his background, that this was not a meteor strike. This wasn't their imagination. This was that they had been targeted somehow. So they go back into the house. They go up into the parents' bedroom, which was upstairs, so that they could have a better look at the area behind the house. And their house flooded with light. The last thing that the main witness's wife said was, "Oh my God, I'm being probed." Then all their memories are like blanked out for 4 hours. 4 hours that they can't account for. The middle son, he found himself pacing back and forth in front of his bedroom door. I mean, it was just the strangest case. But it was military again, and it seems like our visitors seem to have a deep a concern, I think it is, about humanity's propensity to war with each other. I think that there's a question that that we have the ability to feel compassion, we have the ability to feel empathy, but yet we can go and we can attack other people in another nation, which is more or less kind of correlated murder. You're ordered to go out and do this. But I think that there's a big question mark about humanity that's in our visitors' minds, and that this is why perhaps the military families are sometimes treated differently, a little bit more aggressively, maybe.
So why, if these are extraterrestrials, why would they want to visit us? I'm kind of a dimensionalist. I'm not sure I think they're coming from other planets, but I think that they're coming from other dimensions as well. We find experiencers, no matter what their background, no matter what race, what creed, what religion, what political leaning they may have, experiencers are left with 4 messages telepathically given to them. Number 1, war is wrong. Number 2, nuclear war is very, very wrong, and it affects the whole universe when you do this. And number 3, stop using the world as your garbage heap. And number 4, elevate yourself, raise your vibration. And I think that it comes down to that our technology is way up here, but still we're acting like Genghis Khan in a band of marauders. And I think that there's concern about us. And I think that our visitors, and this is just a gut feeling, but I think that it comes down to that they want Star Trek, not Star Wars. And I think that there's fear that we're at the point now where we're about to really enter the space age, with talk of going to Mars and colonizing and all this. Well, we're bringing our bad behaviors with us. And I think that we're being checked on that, and that they're hoping that we can actually change ourselves, that we can elevate ourselves. I don't know about you, but I could sit there and listen to Earl Grey Anderson all night. Our tribute to him continues into the paranormal. I'm Jeremy Scott. Remembering Earl Grey Anderson tonight into the paranormal. I am Jeremy Scott. We've had many of these conversations throughout the years, and certainly ones have affected me more than others. It's like we hang on every single word that comes out of Earl's mouth. At least that's kind of how I felt. He was definitely mesmerizing. More of our conversation from 2023 at the McMinimans UFO Fest.
You mentioned the nuclear weapons, and we heard of some very classic events about 60 years ago with Malmstrom and Minot Air Force bases of UFOs flying over and then the nuclear weapons being disabled. Do we know if that is still happening?
I have not heard of any contemporary stories that are synonymous with what Robert Salas and the other gentlemen.
Maybe they realized we were not going to listen.
I don't know. Maybe they're not being reported, is my guess. My feeling is that it's still going on. We still find so many of my cases will come from just outside of a military base, or I've had soldiers that have been abducted from their barracks, and oftentimes in some of these cases, I have one gentleman who was abducted from his barracks some years back, and it was almost threatening the way that they treated him. They told him, "Well, we took you, we've paralyzed you, and now we're going to take your soul." I think if they wanted to see how he would react, was he going to react violently? Was he going to? Well, he wound up praying, and he reacted in a positive way. He suddenly found himself back in his barracks. He still had encounters with his beings, but they seemed to be more positive. Like you'd find himself actually operating a UFO and flying over a military base. And I've heard that story many, many times from many different people. So, but I think that initial contact episode is where they find out what the person's motives are, where their head is at as far as, are you violent or are you compassionate?
Do you think that the majority of these unidentified craft are military? Are they another country? Are they like a private entity that's not military related in this country, or are they extraterrestrial? Or is there another possibility?
I think all the above. I think that we have our UFOs. I would hope that after over 70 years since Roswell, that some of the reverse engineering work that we've done has borne fruit. So I do think that we probably have anti-gravity and some of these abilities ourselves. But I believe that the majority of what we're seeing is probably extraterrestrial or interdimensional.
Okay. So do you think that our military, our government, knows far more about this than they're releasing?
Yeah, I think that they definitely. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you know a little bit about my own background. My mom worked for officialdom. She was a secretary for Howard Hughes over at Hughes Aircraft. And that was where I first got my disclosure, was when I was 5 years old. My mom thought that I was young enough that she would be able to tell me her story, but that I'd forget it.
Yeah.
And to her horror, I kept bringing it up over and over again. But her story was, she talked about working in a deep underground military base, like a city under the desert. This was back in the 1950s. And then she sort of addended that information with, oh, and by the way, UFOs and aliens are a real thing. We already know this. But my mom said years ago that they're never going to tell the public. They're never going to tell the public. They're afraid of how the public's going to react. And, all you have to do is turn on the news or read a newspaper, and you see people, taking pot shots at each other, and just there's bad reaction with just human life. Now, if you bring aliens into the equation, people are going to feel threatened by that. And especially they're not going to, I don't believe that the government is going to reveal anything about the experience or phenomena.
You mentioned the missing time earlier, and I'm wondering, through your studies, have you found that to be a common element?
It's very common. Yeah, people will have missing time and missing memories. People's memories are oftentimes wiped. I mean, I'll talk about this during my presentation tonight, but a lot of people, I mean, when you poke at the phenomena, you can't be surprised if it pokes back. And a lot of us have had experiences ourselves, and my wife and I had like what we call our weird week, where there were 3 different incidents, and I had I kept my memory of the entire thing, I believe. I mean, it took about 20 minutes, the experience that I had with beings. But my wife, she had an experience as well. On the 3rd night, our house again flooded with light, and there was something over our house shining what was like God's own spotlight down. My wife and I had a telepathic moment where we were told something telepathically, probably from whoever was in the craft. But my wife doesn't remember any of that. She just remembers the house flooding with anomalous light. Thank God she remembers that, or she'd probably think that I was completely nuts. But we find that's a very common thing, that people will have their memories wiped of their encounters.
Speaking of people thinking you're nuts, I'm sure you deal with I'm sure you deal with that in MUFON reporting. Is you have to convince someone, look, it's okay to come forward and share your story, and we don't think you're nuts.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, that was a big thing for me when we had our own experience, you know, when the phenomenon became personal. Who do I talk to about this? I mean, a lot of the people I knew from MUFON at that point, this was 8 years ago, were kind of nuts and bolts about the phenomenon. But yet this thing literally reached out and touched me, you know. I mean, it was a physical and a psychological experience. And that's where the ERT comes in really beautifully. I mean, if any of this sounds familiar to you guys, whether you're here in the audience or out there listening to the radio show, if you go to MUFON.com, it'll have 2 buttons that you can click: report a craft or report beings. And if you have had an encounter with anomalous beings, you click on that one, and someone like myself or like Sev will get back with you, and we'll believe you because we know it's real. It's a very, very real phenomenon. And there's some place where you can talk, where you can have an unjudgmental listener to tell your experiences to. And we find there's catharsis and hope for people when they can do that.
From McMiniman's UFO Fest in 2023, our conversation with the late, great Earl Grey Anderson, Southern California MUFON State Director. Rest in peace. More to come on our program tonight. Somewhere between the paranormal and the abnormal, as we remember the life of Earl Grey Anderson on the program. I'm Jeremy Scott. Into the Paranormal will continue. We remember Earl Grey Anderson, Southern California State Director for MUFON, giant in the field of ufology and just in life in general. We do so with through some of the words that he has spoken right here on the program.
I'm taking them quite seriously, to tell you the truth.
He's, of course, talking about the egg-shaped UFO, about Jacob Barber coming forward, the recent whistleblower, and about egg-shaped UFO craft in general.
When I first heard the report, as it was first announced to the public, there wasn't a whole lot of information. And, as an egg-shaped craft, that's not the first case of an egg-shaped craft. I mean, the famous Lonnie Zamora craft was technically egg-shaped.
New Mexico, police officer.
Yeah, New Mexico police officer case, one of Dr. Hynek's favorite cases, actually. It was egg-shaped. It had like a little tripod, or I guess little landing legs underneath it of some sort.
Sure.
But virtually the same shape. I know that there was one case that was reported from a whistleblower a long time ago that was supposedly at Wright-Patterson Base in 1946 is the year, that was egg-shaped as well. That it's not an uncommon shape for a UFO. What really stood out for me about this gentleman's testimony was the psionic involvement that he mentioned. Mm-hmm. I've heard very, very similar reports from, quite a few people, experiencers usually, but sometimes from people that had a close encounter with a craft where there was a telepathic involvement. He talked about feeling this great love being emanated, that it had this female quality to it that he spoke about. And I've heard a case very recently, a very well-documented one. I can't really mention names because the guy is actually a federal employee, but where he had an encounter with a craft, with beings, and he said that he felt so much love being radiated towards him that he felt he had PTSD after that encounter, not because he was so frightened, but because he missed the feeling of such love that came from those beings. So, taking all these other cases into account, I look for markers from case to case, repeating scenarios and repeating testimony from different people. Usually I look for, hopefully from very good witnesses. And that is a thing, what he described. And that for that reason, specifically, I'm taking it very seriously.
Earl was there for an opinion when you needed one. It was not just an opinion that he would pull out of you-know-what. It was an educated opinion based on his research, based on the patterns and the trends, which he had alluded to earlier. He kept close in, as any good investigator would, right? You don't want to let this out because then everybody's going to be saying, well, I experienced this. If everybody knows that it's going on and they want to embellish a story, they can include that detail. If they don't know that it's a thing and then that it's been reported by countless other experiencers, it's harder to make that up, which makes those stories even more credible once you start getting witnesses who are independent of each other, all basically saying the same thing. Earl Grey Anderson, may he rest in peace, and whether you are a member of the family listening to the broadcast, a member of the UFO community, we just thank you for clicking play on this episode and helping us to remember the life of Earl Grey Anderson. I want to move along to Dale Robinson, who is host of Observer of Anomalous Objects podcast, who had actually seen our live radio broadcast from McMiniman's UFO Fest in 2023 down in McMinnville, and recently invited me onto his podcast to talk about this crazy, wacky world of UFOs. But much like the voices you've heard on the program tonight, Dale, you were influenced by your interactions with Earl.
Yeah, very much so. I think there's probably only been a couple of people in my life that I have been, especially in a short amount of time. I really knew Earl for a little bit over a year. Like you said, the first time I saw Earl was at the McMiniman's UFO Festival in 2023. That room was kind of crowded, but it was a great session. And then Travis was speaking, and then there was this other guy there, and he was doing some kind of a radio program. I think his name was Jeremy Scott. You know that guy?
Anyway, I've met him a time or two.
Okay. So anyway, I had you on my podcast, and I thought it was so bizarre because after I had you on my podcast a few months ago, I went home, and the cover for my iPad, I was looking to pull my cord out of it, and there was this, I guess it's about a 3x3 or a 4x4 little card, and it says Into the Parabnormal, and it has all the information, and this came from 2023. I have it in my hand right now.
Wow.
And I thought that was so cool. I was so impressed, Jeremy, with your radio program. It inspired me. to really think about making a difference. There are a couple other podcasts that were also very important as far as me starting my own podcast, but definitely listening to you definitely was part of my inspiration. So I want to thank you for that.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, the way I really got to meet Earl, and I'm not really sure how it happened. I can't remember how he ended up being on my podcast, but Earl was just a great guest. I mean, some guys you have to worry about whether you're going to get him to talk enough. You know, Earl, I mean, he had his stuff down, and it was really good. Now, one of the things that surprised me, and I think it surprised Earl as well, is that at some point in the podcast, I mentioned that I was a pastor. And some people know it, some people don't, but I'll just have to say this. I'm not that kind of pastor. But Earl mentioned that he was a Christian. And believe it or not, I said this in my post to X in a tribute I made for Earl there. Some of my least favorite people in the world are Christians. And that probably sounds strange coming from a pastor, but it's because I really believe it's all about love. And sometimes Christians get caught up with rules and regulations, but I think if you just love people and if you do that and you love God, I just think that fulfills everything. So you don't need a bunch of rules. And the reason I bring this up is because Earl was the epitome of what Christians should be. You know, he was a loving, kind, caring person, not judgmental. He was about as gentle a soul as I've ever met in my life. And so we started building a friendship up. Now, one of the things that I remember was the wildfires, you know, this summer. And I was messaging Earl, and there was a time that he wasn't sure whether his house was going to survive it or not. And so we kept messaging back and forth, and I was really relieved that his house, and I think it was Jay Heineck's son as well, his house was under threat. And it was a big deal because a lot of Dr. Heineck's notes and stuff were actually in the house. And so there was a fear that information could be lost forever. And so we developed this close friendship. And so I'm an experiencer myself. And I'd been talking to Earl about it. And I went in and finally met with Yvonne Smith, who's a hypnotherapist. And so I talked to Earl afterwards, and I thought it was so cool because he goes, you know what? That would be a great story to tell Steve Neal of Breaking the Silence.
We can't just end it there. We do have to go to break, so that means we'll continue with Dale Robinson in just a moment. I'm Jeremy Scott. Somewhere between the paranormal and the abnormal. We're talking with the host of Observer of Anomalous Objects podcast, Dale Robinson, an experiencer who had an interaction with Earl Grey Anderson, who we're paying tribute to tonight, following, what was it, a regression session with Yvonne Smith?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And one of the things that was nice is, you know, as a pastor, it's really difficult to come out as an experiencer. And the other thing was, as a podcaster, you don't really want the focus to be on you. You want it to be on other people. And so it's really difficult to know who to talk to. But Earl was one of those guys, like I said, from the day that we did that podcast, we just clicked. We just clicked as friends. And so he was the kind of guy that I just felt like I could share anything with. And so I had talking to him about the results that came out of the hypnosis session, you know, some of the things that were recovered that went along with some other things that I had already learned. And that's when Earl, he's the kind of guy that will do anything for you. If you're a friend, he will do anything for you. And he'll do anything for you, even if he isn't, even if you're not a friend. He's just was that kind of person. And like I said, I've met very few people in my life that are as loving, kind, caring, and gentle as Earl was. And so when I shared with him what I found out, like I said before, Earl's like, hey, Steve's got this channel, and ironically, I had actually seen some of the episodes on it, so I was familiar with it. And he said, I think that would be Steve's always looking for people to come on and tell their stories. He said, I think that would be a great story. But he went the extra mile. He didn't just tell me about it. He actually reached out and talked to Steve Neal. And so we connected, and I ended up going from where I live in Oregon, driving down I-5, going to Ventura. Now, the crazy thing, it was right at the tail end of the wildfires that were going on, the crazy LA wildfires. And the day that we were going to do my episode, there was a wildfire that broke out close to Ventura. And as Earl came in, because he was going to help out with the episode, he told us that there was actually ash falling on the ground. And so we were all a little nervous, especially with the wildfires that had happened and all the damage. And I can't imagine what those poor people went through. And like I said, Earl was almost one of those people. At least he was very, very concerned that would happen. And so it was such a relief, because I had met Steve before. Steve is just a super nice guy. And in many ways, he's a lot like Earl. He was a Hollywood special effects person. In case you don't know who Steve Neal is, he's got the Breaking the Silence channel. But Earl was there, and we got some beautiful pictures. We had some beautiful conversation while we were there, and it was just nice. Honestly, Jeremy, it was nice having somebody that I was familiar with, because I was really in unfamiliar territory. I mean, it's one thing to have your experiences. It's another thing to actually put it on record. It's another thing to have a camera in your face as you try to tell what happened to you. And so having Earl there was really a great comfort to me. And he kind of just kept me even keel. And even Steve did that as well. It was just a nice, relaxed setting. And I really felt like the episode went well. And part of that was because Earl was there. And what you see with Earl on a podcast is who he is all of the time. I mean, that's not just, some people get on a podcast or get on a program and they put on a face. They put on the face that they want people to see. But I was able to spend some more time with Earl. One of the things that he had told me earlier is if I was ever in LA, to look him up and we could go out and have lunch. And so when the recording was over, he said, man, we should get together. And we figured out dinner would be better than lunch. And so he said, once you get a hold of me in a couple days, and I will take you to a nice restaurant in LA, that's got some history to it. And so a couple days later, I connected with him. We found a place that was between where I was and where he was located, kind of a middle area where it was about the same distance for both of us to go there. And he picked El Coyote Mexican restaurant. And the interesting thing about El Coyote Mexican restaurant, at least what Earl told me, is that it is the oldest Mexican restaurant in LA. And so that restaurant had so much history to it. And it was really cool because we had to sit in there, there was a waiting line, as you would expect for a nice restaurant. But as we were sitting there were all of these pictures of famous people. This was a famous historical restaurant, and I would have never known about it if it wasn't for Earl. But I'll tell you, the best thing about the restaurant was the company. He brought another guy, I think his name was Dusty, another MUFON person with him. And so the three of us ended up sitting there chatting about UFOs and about MUFON and just about life. And like I said, the company was unbelievable. I'm not a guy that likes to go out and eat a lot like that. I tend to be a little more of a hermit, but the company was amazing. But something happened that night that will stick with me the rest of my life. And that is that Earl mentioned that his hip was hurting. And he was talking about, it's a decent amount of pain. He was using a cane to be able to get around because of his hip. But he thought it was just that he'd had a hip replacement. And he thought, well, it's just time to have another hip replacement. And so a few days later, after he went and saw his doctor, that's when he gave me the bad news, and that it was cancer. And I was very, very concerned for him. But it looked like, and I think most of the people that know Earl know this, some doors seemed to open for him. He found this really good doctor and who had actually heard him on Coast to Coast the night before. And so everything was looking really good. All these things seemed to be falling into place. In fact, the last message that I got was a group message that had been sent out through Yvonne, I think it was, where Earl said that his cancer seemed to be very treatable and that everything, looked good going forward. And so I had chatted with him the day that he went to the hospital to get all the exams. And I know it was very, very difficult, very, very painful for him. In fact, he explained to me exactly how painful it was. It was like a 10. And I'll be honest with you, Jeremy, I don't understand how people do that. I guess I'm a wimp when it comes to pain.
You and me both.
When it has to do with that level of pain. And, that's when people become mean, right? That's when people become grumpy. But
ask me or ask my wife. I was out for a week with a shoulder that was just screaming on fire. Dale, thank you so much for coming on the program. Dale Robinson, sharing some thoughts with us about Earl Grey Anderson. And we must end with some audio just sent to us, in fact, by Ron James of MUFON Media Relations and filmmaker of Accidental Truth UFO Revelations, of an interview, unreleased clip of an interview that he has just released that was with Earl, I believe, in January. So here's that.
Have to figure, though, we don't have a real good track record historically. We're primates, technically. And chimpanzees, they've been known to do wars against warring tribes. So it's sort of in our DNA, and I don't know. I'm hoping that there's a way that we can advance past that, and maybe it is the consciousness element to this. I don't think this is their first rodeo. I'll tell you that.
I think that they probably seed planets all over the place.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of aliens. I'm afraid of humans. That's my feeling. No,
it's true.
Yeah. Well, let's hope, and let's push for humanity bettering themselves. There's a trifecta of messages that experiencers get. A lot of military tell me this. Number one, nuclear weapons are evil, they're wrong, and if you try to use them, you're going to destroy your planet and yourself, so don't. Number two, stop trashing your world. It's not a resource for you to completely use
like
up
locusts.
And then go to the next planet. We're not going to let you do that. And number three, better yourselves. Raise your vibration. Live on a higher frequency. And that one confuses people sometimes. I'm not a new age guy. It's like, what, vibration, what I have to shake or something. But it's three things, and they're not threats. They're like concern at sea.
Thank you, Earl Grey Anderson, for your contributions to ufology and just for being an amazing, wonderful person, especially in this world where it can be quite crummy at times, from the cold, dark depths of a secret dungeon somewhere deep in the remote Pacific Northwest. Until next time, friends, good night, and God bless. I'm Jeremy Scott.